Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Nevers. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Monday, as well as the cops in general, hitting up the orphanage, and obviously tearing the place apart, trying to look for stuff, because obviously the last person seen running after Malady was Amalia, so he's kind of wondering, like, hey, maybe there's some connection here. Luckily, Lavinia shows up in time to be like, yo, I basically got word from someone on high as well that, you know, this is kind of all a mistake. The fact of the matter is you were given these orders by someone by mistake. Don't worry, the blame won't fall on you or your men, but I need you to kind of back away. But it is a thing of who gave the orders, because whoever it was someone higher up. It seemed like it could have been Masson, but it seems like Lavinia and I think even like Amalia were kind of saying like, nah, it doesn't seem like it was him. But even, you know, Lavinia, and she talks about the fact is that like her and Masson don't agree on a lot of things, but she doesn't feel like he's the one that did this, even though he has the power and position. But I mean, maybe that's kind of showcasing he has more power than she kind of realizes, or maybe that there is something or someone else at play here. But because Monday was like interested in Malady, not only just for Malady's sake, but also Mary's. But it's like, why though? So later on, a woman named, was her name just Desire, shows up, and it was really interesting because like she's like, yeah, basically someone wants her dead. She's like, yeah, people just kind of like talk to me and just kind of open up to me, and it's like she's like, I kind of forget a lot of secrets, but someone wants me dead. But like immediately Amalia kind of sees to her. She's like, yeah, the kid was a nice touch, this and that, but it's like, and then she kind of starts going off about everything going on, and then she has to pause and stop, and then she realizes like, oh, Desire has a turn, and that's the word I couldn't think of last episode. Turn is the name of the abilities that the touched have, and that's also that also coincides with what I was bringing up last episode, which I think is such an interesting thing. It seems like everyone's turn on some shape or form plays with who they are, because it seemed like Desire, like she says like, oh, like I'm a whore, so like I think professionally that's what she was doing beforehand. And so her whole thing was like people, in particular men, opening up to her, like basically spilling their secrets, the things they wouldn't tell anyone else. They ended up telling her. She even says like, yeah, there's even a situation of like, yeah, there's been occasion where men have kind of proposed to me because of said very kind of get caught up in the lust of everything and just kind of releasing their quote-unquote tensions. It's just like, oh, they fall so in love with me, they want to marry me. They even propose and everything. But it's like, all that happens naturally, but since becoming touched, that just, like I said, like it's interesting how your power kind of reflects like a little bit of like professional or professionally who you were like before you became touched, and it seems like your turn is kind of an amplification of that. So like she was already good at people getting their secrets off their chest and kind of, you know, spilling their guts to her. Now it's not just guys, but everyone, you know, it's like basically when people get agitated or frustrated or whatever, it like triggers her power, which is so interesting. Like it takes someone else's circumstances to activate her ability. She doesn't activate it naturally. It just takes, you know, and obviously I love how Amalia uses that to her advantage. She goes up to Monday and she slaps him and starts asking questions because she knew that would kind of get the ability started, and he kind of opens up about Mary. In fact, him and Mary used to be engaged until that kind of, you know, but for him it's like, knowing me, he's like, honestly, I can't blame her for walking away. I wouldn't marry me either. And obviously he got frustrated because it's like, damn it, you got me talking. And so he's got a gun pointed at Amalia, which once again, she doesn't back down. She's kind of like unafraid, which is so interesting. But her and Monday actually kind of get along, actually, because I think there's a lot of similarities between them, because for her it's like, oh, I know violence, and he's like, yeah, but I don't know. What I'm wondering is how you understand what I'm, because that's Monday's reputation, is like, oh, he gets like very handsy on targets and stuff like that. I even love Lucy being like, what does set you off? And he's like, when people call me Frankie, and she had just called him Frankie earlier, but like, the fact is, I think it's because it's not common for, I guess, in this particular time and place, but, like, you know, I think it's just not commonplace for a woman to kind of know such violence, and that's what surprised him, that she could understand that. She was like, is it about your husband? But then he was like, yeah, unless it's pertinent to Mary, I guess it's not my business to really dive into that. But she talks about the fact is that she's kind of known violence, like a lot of her life. And it's kind of like, for her, like, fighting is actually one of the few times she actually knows herself. Because of her ability, because of the ripple, she kind of gets lost in, like, you know, what is present day. Because even he's saying, like, okay, so if you're having a dream of the beach, if you're having a ripple of the beach, did you go to the forest or something like that? But she's saying, like, it's a situation of, like, the way she's talking about it's like everything she sees is set in stone. It's gonna happen. So, but it does seem like a lot of times she leads herself to it. Like, she just, I don't know, maybe in the past she did try to, like, go, like, the complete opposite of whatever her vision was. But I guess it's just, like, at this point, it's like, because last episode, it's like, oh, I guess we're going to the opera because she saw the opera. But I guess it's like, because she leans into it because it's like, yeah, I can try and run from it. But I guess in the past, it's always led her right to where the ripple takes place. So for her, it's like, so maybe for her, it's like, yeah, everything's so set in stone, there's no point in fighting it because she's tried before. So she just kind of leans into it. But because of an ability that takes you out of time, that kind of, makes you loose, it's just kind of like you just kind of get taken out of the moment when you're kind of stuck, I guess, always, like, looking towards the future because of your ability and stuff like that. Maybe fighting, she finds herself there. She, like, it grounds her a little bit in, like, oh, this being the moment, because it's hard to be in the moment when your ripples kind of just kind of take you out of every moment. So maybe it seems like to me that's at least what she was kind of alluding to or kind of explaining when she was talking about, like, that's kind of when she's really herself. It's like when she's in a fight, it's, Another interesting angle to this episode is actually a really sad one to me. It's the lady at the beginning. Home dude was kind of hitting on her, almost like, oh, I can get you new gloves and stuff like that, because, like, the work here, your gloves, yeah, they're not as white as they could be. And it's like, oh, he was almost kind of like setting up a situation, like, oh, I can get you some blah, blah, blah. But it turns out she's touched. Anything she touches levitates. And it sucks because her friend, who was like, because it's like, oh yeah, like, because they speak, I think you're from Italy, I'm assuming, because I believe they were speaking Italian, and her quote unquote friend was kind of like, hey, like, I would love to have an ability, something that could do this, like, something like, oh, like, because it's so interesting to, like, oh, flirt with the idea of being touched, and then said friend later on turns her in, but, like, she's over here, I was like, you suck, you were up there literally talking all this about, oh, how you like to be touched, oh, what your turn would be and stuff like that. Now that you actually had a friend who has an ability, you immediately turn on him, because, I think that's supposed to show you the state of the world, where it's like, people turn against you, because, like, oh, you're touched. The moment everyone in the store saw she was touched, like, oh my god, she's touched. It's like, almost like, ew, she has a disease, get away from her. So it was just kind of a shame. And it's like, if it wasn't for that, like, if there was more acceptance, she wouldn't have gotten captured by that doctor and wouldn't have gotten legitimately lobotomized for it, so we will be circling back to that soon enough. But another angle to this is Lavinia, wanting to parade the touched around a little bit, kind of, because of everything that went down with Malady, and to Masson's benefit, at least what he's kind of saying is, now the public has swayed a little bit more negatively towards the touch. They don't have, like, the positive reception that Lavinia was trying to give them, has been trying to give them. So Lavinia wants to spin things a little bit by, like, having some touch come to her place and have, like, a party, and so that people can see, like, oh, here's some turn abilities that aren't so scary, kind of using, like, parlor tricks to kind of, like, oh, ooh, the turn aren't that bad, ooh, neat. So they ended up bringing, like, Harriet, who freezes stuff, Myrtle, who has a different languages, Primrose being as tall as she is, because that ended up being a whole conversation within itself about how, it's like, nah, like, Primrose isn't someone to be scared about. The fact is, she's kind of, as sweet as a kitten. It's like, yeah, but when that kitten gets 10 feet tall, you call it a tiger, So Primrose ends up going, because Penance ended up being, like, the main one, and she's the one that kind of decided who goes. Lucy. I guess Lucy, because I don't know they've really explained what Lucy's thing is, because later on it was like, oh, people were making bets about her destroying a statue, so I don't know whether her powers are straight up, like, superhuman strength or something like that. But they all get invited. They even happen to wear these little blue ribbons to be like, hey, look at us, we're touched. Don't get it confused. We look like regular women, but we're touched. It's kind of like they have to single themselves out. And even Lucy kind of gives Penance this look, and Penance is just kind of like, yeah, we just kind of have to go with it, you know? It's just like this, because it benefits them in the long run, because the more they're helping, you know, Lavinia kind of clear the air about the touch, the less like trouble, the people will be less weary of them at the very least. This way they can kind of do what they want to do and kind of need to do without, you know, the judgment of everyone coming after them. It's, you know, it prevents stuff like Mundy getting like orders and permission to kind of raid the orphanage the way he did. Like it'll help, I think, you know, prevent stuff like that happening again. But everyone's showcasing their abilities. But what was really interesting is obviously Penance and Augustus hitting it off, you know, because she asked, you know, it's like, oh, like prior to like the opera, did you have any idea? And he had some idea, and he talked a little bit about his turn, basically it being the ability to like get inside it. It seems, because for him it's like, oh, he's always had a thing for birds, and it seems like his power, because I was wondering, you know, maybe it's just allocated to birds now, but maybe eventually he can, like, because he talks about like being able, it's almost like he's inside the body of the bird and he's able to fly. He used to have dreams about it, but then he'd hear sermons at church and kind of be awake and end up kind of flying. He kind of gets scared of like, well, what if I get inside of a bird and I can never get back? But obviously Penance kind of jokes with him about like, oh, the poor bird being stuck listening to the sermon, kind of implying, like, joking, like, oh, what if they actually switch bodies? But it seems like it's more so like, I don't know whether it's like he can it seems like it's, oh, he possesses the bird's body, like he can possess birds specifically, because we see him use it a little bit later on. But he's hitting it off with Penance, but then his sister comes to quickly shut that down. And the question is, well, why, though? You know? Well, because she's kind of saying, like, well, for one, Penance is Irish, and she's Dutch, so there's no way she's going to be sharing the Bigelow name. And because for him, it's like, you doing this, it's just going to, like, ruin not just your reputation, but hers. Because, you know, Lavinia is saying, like, they are my project. They are my charity. So kind of like, because that's the whole thing, too. Because for Penance, she had brought that up earlier. It's like, yeah, like, even, you know, Lavinia is uncomfortable coming here, even though, like, this is kind of her project and stuff like that. But then you had, like, Amalia being like, well, yeah, but she's kind of uncomfortable everywhere. Because I think it's kind of hinting that Lavinia is not a woman that kind of fits anywhere, doesn't really have a place of her own, so maybe that's why she takes such care about the touch, because they're her project to be, you know, it's kind of her thing to kind of, she already kind of stands out a little bit, and maybe this is supposed to, I don't know, maybe it's something she feels that's dangerous yet so interesting that she wants to connect with, while also, because she has a dissonance with it as well, you know, because it's like, because it's not something that's common ground for her. She doesn't know about Augustus because she's thinking like, oh, you're just getting that close to her because she's pretty and she's fascinating, but it's not, because he hasn't been able to confide in his sister. But I guess it's like, because his sister can be so controlling and stuff like that, the fact that she doesn't even just doesn't even take the time to really listen to him, it's just like, because he's like, you know, oh, it's not, he was trying to say like, oh, that's not what it's like between me and Penance, but for her it's just like, yeah, you're just doing her more injustice, you're what it'll do to her reputation. So later on, sadly, yeah, even though they were hitting it off, Augustus kind of like cuts ties with her. It's like, yeah, I think you and the others should go. And he was just kind of a dick to her. But later on, he was using his powers to kind of follow her through a bird for a little bit. But then he kind of snaps back, and it's just like, oh, it's such a shame. I think the next time Augustus is around, Lucy's going to be probably upset because she saw how hurt Penance was because of it. So like, Lucy's, I think, kind of like the big sister figure who's like, probably the next time she'll probably like threaten Augustus or something, which later on we see him at Swan's little ferryman's party, and we kind of get more understanding of what that is all about. That basically he's trying to like benefit from the touch, because if he can basically run a gentleman's club or like he can kind of sell like the touch as like this like, oh, like exotic experience, he can make a lot of money off of it, and that's what it seems like Monday's connected to that. I guess it's more so like just look the other way and be my business partner in this. But he also needs Augustus because it gets legitimized if he can have the Bigelow name associated with it, because it's like their reputation is kind of like this higher standard name, and it's like, if their name, you know, if it's like, oh, if we're partners in this, it legitimizes my business. So we see Augustus kind of getting taken away by two ladies later on, but it's like, I don't know what that's going to become of that, because obviously Swan acts like his friend, but truth be told, it's like, yeah, you're just kind of a means to an end. But Manson kind of got in his face earlier in the episode about, like, yeah, it's kind of like shady what kind of business you're upholding. You think, like, you know, I forgot what he was kind of implying, like, how indecent it was and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, like, so many of my fellow members are part of my, like, group and stuff like that. Yes, they might be members and stuff like that, so you might have a little sway, but eventually that's going to be broken. But, you know, Swan has a lot of, he's saying, like, basically, because of his group and everything, and it being more of a public out in the open type of thing, like, he has a lot more power and control than Manson would probably want him to. And we got into a little bit about his family too, because it turns out, like, his dad isn't in his right state of mind. Like, his dad kind of lost his mind, but it seems like it was a byproduct of his brother drowning. And it's like, yeah, kind of basically Manson saying, like, the wrong son drowned, like, you know, it should have been you that drowned, but you're the one that's going to drown now, essentially, because Manson's probably going to do what he can to, like, to destroy the Fairman's Club, especially considering everything Swan's up to involve the touch, because obviously the way Manson feels about the touch. We also got that scene between Mary and Malady, where she talks about the fact is that, like, God's gift to her is the fact is that she's the only one that remembers. No one else remembers the day 3 years ago with that ship and everything, but she does. But then she talks about his angels and the white coats, and I'm assuming, like, the people from the asylum that took her away, because that was also something that Amalia was talking about with Mundy, was like because it coincides with the conversation Mary was having about her power. The reason why Malady was kind of, like, pissed at her, it's because, like, she's like, I was chosen by God, like, my pain and everything, like, all the stuff I went through, your song and everything takes it away. And for her, it's like, that's not, almost like my pain is my pain, and her pain, she feels like, is God speaking through her, that her pain is her connection to God. And it's like, you and your song kind of take that away. And it was also the whole conversation about, you know, it's like, oh, like, you know, you're a part of a choir of nine women that you're your senior, like, how did you lose your spark and everything? And it's like, you know, who took it from you? Was it, like, your uncle or, like, a priest, or who did something to you to kind of take it away? Which, when I think that was kind of Malady talking from her own experience of, like, what was done to her. In her mad way, it does seem like there is still some crazy logic to what she's doing and why she's doing it. Because she need that, like I said, Amalia kind of explained that, like, pain is kind of her relationship with God. Like, it's been so twisted by, like, all the terrible stuff that's happened to her, and it makes her feel like, you know, she's so twisted, she confuses pain with pleasure, you know? So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and just, like, that's what I thought was so interesting about the fact that you took Mary, but maybe that's why she took Mary, because she wants to understand, like, that song and everything. It's like, you know, it's like the way it made me feel. It's like, no, I don't like the way it made me feel, because it kind of took away my pain. It's like, God gave me all this pain, but she was like, you're pleasant. The fact of the matter is, he feels that song in your throat. So for Malady, I think it's, you know, it's almost like, why did God kind of bestow this upon you, yet, like, gives me nothing but pain? Like, no, pain that's his real love and his affection. That is showing how special I am. At least I thought I was special, you know? So I wonder if she was worried that, like, Mary's song and stuff like that was kind of taking away her specialness. Because of her ripple, Amalia was able to find Malady. Also, another interesting thing too was, like, between Malady and Bonfire, because Bonfire is like, I can deal with crazy boss, I can't work with stupid, you know, just like how, like, it was just interesting. Like, I guess I was like, oh, I guess, do they have that type of relationship? I don't know whether it's just kind of like a, oh, I'm loyal to you thing, or is it, like, more than loyal, that it's an infatuation that they have. I don't know. I don't really know what because they make it seem like Bonfire is kind of more so here because she is a hired gun. Because there was that other lady who was talking to Mary. She talked about the fact it's like, oh, I can't wait for my turn. Like, I know I'm touched. She even says like, oh, I sacrificed like my small toe just for this opportunity. So she's someone that believes in this cause. But she's saying like Mary. She was kind of implying that Bonfire doesn't. That Bonfire and like just. Is it Bonfire Ann or Annie? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. We'll just refer to her as Bonfire. But Bonfire, like, doesn't believe in the call. She's just here. But, like, why she got mixed all up in this, besides just being the hired gun, like, what else she's getting out of this, we don't know. But, Amalia and, Malady, you know, Amalia like beats the crap out of her, and it was interesting because Malady refers to Amalia as the demon that follows her, the one who sheds her skin. It's like, go ahead and shed, you know. And it turns out, in fact, Malady and Amalia know each other, and she was like, we were friends at one point in time, but you turned on me, and she's like, I didn't have a choice. And I'm wondering if that has to deal with like. Not because she said for 2 years. I don't think she's talking necessarily those 3 years, maybe 2 of those 3 years, but maybe she's kind of implying like when Malady was like taken, like we saw that at the end of last episode, she was basically getting locked away, taken by the doctors in the facility at the end of the episode, because that was back 3 years ago when everyone when the touch kind of like spread out, you know, the power and everything. So I'm wondering, like, is that what she was talking about, that, you know, Amalia turned on her? Because she said Molly. I guess that's, like, Amalia's, like, real name, and her real name is Sarah. But, I guess that's when she turned on her. And, you know, it's like I was, you know, like, raped, basically broken to pieces, and then pieced back together and broken again. And, like, you know, that happened because you were supposed to be my friend, but you weren't there for me. You betrayed me, actually. So here's Mary. Is she your best friend? Or what about, you know, Penance? She's here too. You have a choice. You can shoot one while saving the other. And Amalia's like, I'm sorry, but this is my mission, and it is too important, and this mission calls for sacrifice. And rather than sacrificing either one of them, Amalia shoots herself because it's like, you know, this mission is too big. It's bigger than you, and it's bigger than me. And she ends up shooting Amalia. But then, I mean, Amalia ended up shooting Malady. But before Malady could attack her, like, Bonfire stopped her. And I'm like, why though? Maybe because they all know, or maybe like Malady made it clear from the beginning, telling Bonfire like, oh, if I ever try and kill this woman, stop me. Maybe that was kind of like the deal they had. But that's why I was like, it just seemed like out of nowhere. Because I don't know, because Bonfire was listening to their conversation, so it's like, I don't know if she has some kind of connection in that regard, or whether she just did it for Malady or Sarah's sake. I don't know, but luckily, Amalia had set it up ahead of time that, like, she just wanted to make sure she got there first, but she told Desire to, like, let Monday know, like, 10 minutes after she left what was going down and where to go. So luckily they showed up in time, were able to take Amalia back to the orphanage, and it's like, you almost got yourself killed and everything because Dr. Cousins is taking care of her. And it's like, she's like, don't worry, I missed my organs on purpose. And he was like, no, you didn't. Either you don't know anatomy or you're terrible a gun. And she was like, well, it was a terrible gun, so like, kind of chalking it up to that. But obviously there's a lot of questions, but Penance was like, let's just kind of enjoy being alive for right now before we get to any questions or anything. So Mary's going to be staying there at the orphanage, and, you know, it's like, yeah, it's a bit odd, but Mary is like, I'm odd. And now you have Frank asking, like, well, was you being touched the reason why? She's like, I just don't want to talk about that now. He's like, well, you know, obviously I'll call you and question you about things, unless you want a different detective. She's like, no. I'd like it if you called. So maybe there's a repairing of that relationship. Like, who, you know, I'm curious to see where that ends up going. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe being touched is the reason why, or maybe there were other reasons why. He's kind of an insecure person where he just kind of probably assumed, like, oh yeah, the reason why she didn't want to get married is because I'm me, and I wouldn't want to marry me either. So whether there's more to that or not, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, especially because Mary is so important because of her song. Because she even said it herself, like, she doesn't know where it comes from. She just figured it was going to be a reassurance that, like, Malady would stop what she's doing, like, but it's like, it doesn't seem like she can necessarily control it, because like I said, it seems like a lot of these turns are kind of affected by other, well, at least like Desire's, for example, hers, it seems like it's affected by other people, like, you know, where it's really unclear what triggers Amalia's, or even what triggers like Penance's. Hers seems like it's more so like, oh, like she talks about like it's all, the electricity is kind of all in the air, so like hers might just kind of be active like all the time. She did make those special glasses for Amalia. It was supposed to help with like bonfire, but also deal with like, because they're still unclear what like Malady's, you know, turn is, besides like her eyes and stuff like that. Like I said, it seems like there might be some superhuman strength, but beyond that, we don't really know like what the whole deal is. But then we had the ending where the doctor who was lobotomizing those who are turned, it turns out he works for Lavinia, and it seemed like they were digging up, I'm assuming that ship had crash landed somewhere and has been buried in the ground or something for the past 3 years. Not unless that's something related to that ship. I wonder, did she just stumble upon it, or does Lavinia remember like Malady does? I don't know. But it's like, because the thing I'm wondering is, does she know what the doctor's up to? I would assume she has to know. So that's the thing of like, she's got some people who are turned down there doing all that stuff. Like I said, not unless the doctor's doing all that without Lavinia knowing. Because she's got this pretense of pretending like she's helping the touch, but maybe it's because she's trying to get something out of it herself. Maybe she only wants to get so close to them because she's trying to understand it all, because it's a mystery that she likes trying to solve, because she wants to be able to take advantage of it herself, because maybe she's hoping that if they can dig this out and understand it, she could utilize the powers of the touch to become one herself. Maybe it's a thing of she's upset at not being chosen. Like, there's so many women around her that are, even her own brother, because some men are affected as well, but it's like maybe on some level she knows her brother's afflicted, but she needs to kind of keep him down to feel special, to feel powerful. I don't know. But it's like, the question, like I said, becomes, what does she know? And I get the feeling like, obviously, it's kind of implying that she's not the helper, and that she might prove to be more adversary than helper going forward. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe in her own way this is her helping, and like I said, she has no idea what the doctor's up to. That, like, oh, like that woman down there that we saw like get lobotomized, like she is just kind of like one of the people digging now. So I guess, you know, because for him it's like he wants to try and understand like that spark inside of him. So it seems like that would be kind of coincide with what Lavinia wants, especially if this whole thing is hers. But she's like, oh, you're saying that this is fun, you're kind of using the wrong word. She's like, this is war. So it makes you wonder, is she coming from this as from the same perspective as Masson, who's against the touch? Or maybe it's a thing for her that, like, maybe for Lavinia this is a chance to change the world. A war is coming between the touched and just normal people. The world will never be the same, and for her, she's trying to be on this side, one side of history where everything will never be the same, that things have already changed and are going to continue to change, and she wants to be on that side of things and try and, you know, once again, maybe this is her helping her own way. That's my understanding of the ending. I think it's still not enough information is known of what she's really trying to gain out of all of this. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Obviously, catching up with stuff. New episode is coming on tonight, so maybe we'll get some answers. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.